Hello there. Welcome everyone to the Advisor's Edge podcast. I'm your host, Rob Jacomen, and I am super excited and honored to have a very special guest on our show today. And as always, I'm with my co-host, Chad Ramberg. Chad, how are you doing? We're getting towards the end of the year. We're getting ready and fired up for 2025. So welcome all of you guys to the show. Chad?
Yeah, life is good. Hopefully the year ends up fantastic. I think this one's going to actually land the first one of the year. Steve, you get to be our inaugural 2025 guy.
I don't know whether it should be honored or not.
It's fair.
You should be honored. Let me do a formal introduction though. We have a super exciting guest. We have Steve Ryder. He's the Chief Strategy Officer for Visory, and he has just an amazing story to tell and such enormous value to share with all of you today. And Chad brought Steve onto our show. You guys have a personal relationship and have known each other for several years now. So Chad, I'll turn it over to you to dive deeper with Steve.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, Steve, thank you for spending some time with us. The cool thing about Steve and I, what we met, I think it was 2019, DFW FPA.
That sounds about right. And then we went to FPA out in NorCal, did a little long and dance together.
Yeah. The wild thing is, as I was thinking as I was preparing for the show, 2019 is when Box Professional launched. So we were having lots of fun and we really hit it off with Steve, and we run into each other all the time at conferences, which is a lot of fun when you have old friends you get to see. And of course, the team at Visory, we know a lot of your guys there too. So it's a great group. But the funny thing is we had 2019, we did some conferences together, co-presentation, and then we were slated for the 20 presentation at FPA NorCal. And right before that hit, was COVID. And so it was quite interesting. I imagine you remember that presentation a little bit. We were all sitting, it was like this, only not as put together, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It was just the beginning of it all.
Which, here's the cool thing. Steve is a very helpful guy. If you've ever heard him speak at a conference, in fact, if you're going to a conference and you see somebody from Visory there, it's probably Steve. Go sit in on it. He's going to have some interesting insight into the things that are happening in the cyber space. And when you're thinking about Visory, actually, it just helps give somebody some context. Steve, are you considered a managed service provider, or you guys do a lot of different things, but what's the key focus of the work you guys do?
Yeah, so we're a managed service provider and a managed security service provider. We fit both niches. Our vertical, I know we're talking the advisor space, is the wealth management space. So we've been doing this. I owned a company called True North Networks for over 20 years before we merged in with a few other firms and created Visory. So been doing this a long time, always been focused in the wealth management area. It's been a specialty of ours. My background has been in finance and in banking. And so when I branched off into the world, it was a natural fit for me to go stumble myself into the wealth management area.
Yeah. And one of the greatest things I like about you, Steve, personally, is you're a practical guy. Sometimes we get in the tech space really smart people that don't always bring it into some practical things we can do. And
forward to my wife, by the way.
Our wives always see a little bit different from us.
Absolutely.
It's good. Yeah. And I don't know that we'll get into some interesting things you're seeing maybe out there. It is intriguing what's going on in the cyberspace. We get clients, of course, we're helping with their own stuff, but they worry about it all the time. And so let's just maybe start with, what can you tell us are those areas right now where it would really be that nugget for an advisor when they're going into 2025? What's probably the most important thing from a cyber security protection standpoint they should have in the back of their mind?
Yeah, so for me, oftentimes our biggest competition is the local IT provider. And I think oftentimes people don't consider, they're very careful with their money and how much they want to spend to try to protect their clients. And of course, their client and their data are their most important assets. So you can cheap out as far as the level of cybersecurity. When you say cybersecurity, it spans the gamut. Cybersecurity, some folks will say, well, yeah, I have antivirus. That's not a complete cybersecurity solution. It was maybe back in 2015, but not today. And I think it's come a long way. And to me, it's really spending the time and the effort to educate your team on the risks of cybersecurity, to make sure that your team is okay to talk about it and okay to admit if they clicked on something. The biggest risk was take a look in the mirror. Look at yourself as the biggest risk. And oftentimes when I speak, I say, take the biggest risk is look in the mirror and look at the guy on the stage. So we as a managed service provider are a huge risk to clients. And the interesting thing I'm finding over the last 6 months, and I just literally had this conversation internally, I've had more RF in the last 6 months than I've had in the last 20 years. The reason for that is I do think people are getting smarter about making sure they do find the right partner that is doing everything they can to protect their clients. Because I'm a big risk. If somebody breaches Visory, we have a lot of clients. If they get into ours, they could get to a lot of clients. So managed service providers are definitely a big target, and you want to make sure you do go through an RFP process. You do your due diligence as the SEC is asking you to do to make sure you pick the right partner.
Yeah, there's actually like 3 different things I hear in there, which is really great. One is that culture in the company, because you can have the best processes and procedures outlined. And if people aren't comfortable bringing issues or, oops, I clicked on this website, maybe I shouldn't have. If you don't know, it could open a hole that you don't want. But the other thing that I'm hearing embedded in there is the specialty of Visory working with financial services, because you know how to basically, from a security standpoint, help to integrate with whatever systems that financial advisory firm is using. I'm sure you've onboarded all kinds of CRMs. You're familiar with Fidelity, Schwab, the custodials and kind of those requirements and stuff, and how to navigate that, where maybe they may be a great local provider, but they don't have that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of times RIAs will start and they'll just pick a local vendor they've known or they've worked with, or they local to them in the same market. And we've seen over the years, they outgrow them, and then they want to find somebody with a little more specialty niche. I think same with the insurance, right? And you guys are probably seeing the same thing. They want somebody who understands their industry, their risks, their business. If something happens, you know what to do. And we have seen opportunities, I'll say unfortunate opportunities, from clients or prospects at the time who've had a security incident, and the local provider really didn't know what to do. They didn't know who to call. They didn't know where to begin. And so we have seen, again, I don't like to take advantage of other people's problems. We're here to help. We're here to help. Right. Even if this person doesn't become a client, I've been out in this industry for over 20 years, as I said earlier. And if someone's having an issue and they need some help, even if they don't become one of our clients, I'm going to help them. Just as I know you will, Chad. You are have the same upgrade breed of that I have, which is we're here to help. When we are fiduciaries to our clients as they are to theirs, we're looking out for their best interests. We want to help them. And so we will guide them to the right place. And so I've done that many times over the years where, this person didn't end up as a client, or the client didn't end up as a client of ours, but guided them to do the right things. Because changing managed service providers isn't fun. It's not as easy. In your case, changing insurance providers is a lot easier than changing a managed service provider. I talk many times about even clients thinking about it. I had a call literally yesterday, and she's vacillating over wanting to change providers. I'm like, look, if you don't have to change providers, that's a win for you. Here are some things you might want to think about or talk about with your provider. And if they're providing these services, or you can get them to provide these services, then I think you're going to be all set. Been with this provider over 10 years. So all about helping people.
Absolutely. And I love that you're getting lots of RFPs, because the best thing an advisor can do is have a really good, or the best thing an A can do is have a really good MSP, right? And I think I'm curious, you mentioned in there as firms grow, because certainly we work with all size, and if they're financial planning just themselves in an office and they don't have their own servers and stuff like that, they may not be, you might be able to help them with some. I'd say for that individual, make sure and go listen to Steve if you get a chance to hear one of his discussions, because he's going to give you some great tidbits. But at what point does Visory become super valuable? In other words, like the clients that you work best with. I can think in my head what that looks like, but I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, usually 5 people and up, regulated, because we've sat through a number of audits. They're regulated. They have to do their due diligence. They have to have a cybersecurity program. They have to, have policies and procedures in place. They have to have a lot of things documented for the SEC. And they're a perfect client for us because we fit that niche. Our cybersecurity solution was built and designed around an audit. Is built specifically for the wealth management industry. And we're prepared to help folks. And I know there's a lot of other firms out there that are also offering those services as well. So I don't want to always say we're the only ones. So my advice to you is not necessarily, hey, this is a Visory commercial. This is a commercial about finding the right partner. whether it's Visory or whether it's not Visory, make sure you find a partner that is a partner and knows this industry and can help you navigate the regulatory issues and the cybersecurity issues, and making sure keeping an eye on your network. And the other thing, back to the growth for half a second, I know I get rolling along, Chad, so you can shut me up anytime you want. But as companies growing, if they're going to acquire a firm, one of the biggest risks I see is making sure the firm, if you are acquiring a firm, that they're not going through a security incident right now that they don't even know about. We were involved with a due diligence request for a firm who was acquiring another firm several years ago, and we did the due diligence and ran a security scan on the network and discovered that firm was in the middle of a security incident. So it ended up killing the acquisition, but it saved our client a lot of headache, because once they had acquired that firm, it's all of a sudden their problem. So you have to make sure, if you are in the acquisition mode, a cybersecurity audit or vulnerability scan or penetration test, or just scanning the network to make sure there's not an issue going on, has got to be part of the checklist. It's not just, it's no longer right culture, right fit, what's the EBITDA. You've got to add that to the mix. I don't care what firm, I don't care if you're outside the financial services industry, that should be on the list.
Yeah, that's a great thing to just remind us of all right there. One of the things, and I apologize, what we don't want to do, Steve, and I know you and I talked about this before, is not be an infomercial, but be informed. And there's a line there, but when we get into some of this stuff, it's so fascinating. And I think it is helpful for our listeners to hear. And so I'm curious, how about you mentioned you help firms with their audits, and we've been seeing more cyber specific audits. Now it hasn't ramped way up, but it's been this slow tick up. And what's it look like from your perspective? And maybe what's something that you see most consistently that advisors should double check so it gets easier when they get to that audit?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. And I think it's going to uptick more once the SEC finalizes their regulatory requirements. It's still not final for AIs, it's final for publicly traded companies. And they're talking about it's going to mirror very closely to what publicly traded companies are required to do. Who knows? Maybe by the time this airs, maybe it'll finally be final, but right now it's not. Regarding those, it's really important that whatever policies you say you're doing, the SEC wants evidence that you're doing them. So so we've been through folks saying, do you have multi-factor authentication enabled? Prove it. Show me a screenshot of the settings within Office 365. Do you have data loss protection? What are the policies? Show me a screenshot of that. Don't just give me your policy and say, these are our policies. Absolutely prove it. So they're not, the SEC is not accepting the fact these are our written policies. These are the things that we say we're doing. They want to know you're actually doing it. And so we've had to go through and grab screenshots of all these different settings that clients were required to say, hey, this is our password policy, this is our screen lockout policy, this is our password complexity policy, this is our MFA policy, this is our, and prove all these settings are indeed in place. And so don't download information security policy off the internet and fill in the blanks. Whatever you say you're doing, you better darn well be doing and be able to prove it.
The great thing is some of those screenshots, or your team knows, so you're able to collect that as you're putting together, or I don't know, you go through and audit the policies with folks, or how's that work?
Absolutely. We've sat in audits with clients. We've been on the phone calls with the SEC, representing or being the partner. We're their department. We're an extension of their company. So we are a critical component of making sure we're involved with an audit, especially with the cybersecurity audit. That's part of our service. We assume our clients are going to get audited. So that's all part of the package. We don't say, oh, by the way, you're getting audited, there's another X amount of dollars. No, that's part of we know that,
That's great. I'm curious. So we talk, or go ahead, Rob.
No, we obviously we're gonna have to cut that part out. What I was gonna say is Steve, that's the argument that I always put forth when it comes to someone asking me, what's the advantage of working truly with an industry niche specialist? And you just gave, in the last several minutes, you gave exactly the reason why it is so critical to work with somebody who really understands the unique needs and the nuances of that specific industry. Because if you don't know this, you could be out of compliance, but you could be setting yourself up for some serious problems later on. So if you're working with your local IT person or firm that you can trust, sometimes that's not always the advantage, even if you're big or small, it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is you guys really understand the unique needs of the industry and the complexities of the compliance world because that's not going anywhere anytime soon. That's changed constantly every single day. So talk a little bit about your feeling on, if I'm sitting here and I'm an right now, and I'm in the middle of trying to assess that situation of, do I make this move? What process journey, customer experience journey do you guys take on with having that conversation with a new prospect or bringing on a new client to really demonstrate your expertise and your knowledge as far as the industry is concerned?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Great question. So I would say this, we have a lot of different reporting that we can show, that we can provide our clients to show them the level of detail that we can let them know how well we're keeping an eye on their network. A lot of data incidences, as you probably both know, happen without people even knowing it. People are on people's networks for, I've seen, from 10 days to 6 months, depending on what report you want to read and who's doing the report. So let's say it's at least 10 days up to 6 months, right? So you want to know when, if somebody's on somebody's network or something happens, we know about it. We know about it pretty quickly, and we respond to it very quickly. If something happens to a computer, you want to make sure something is done about it as quickly as possible. I also think that you have to understand the regulatory requirements as well. It's interesting to me, this industry, or any industry regarding cybersecurity. Let's pick cybersecurity now conceptually in general. You're supposed to report this stuff. If something happens and it's material and there's a data incident, you're supposed to report it. Now, I know other people in this industry who are specialized in cybersecurity in other areas of the enterprise, so to speak. And we've had these conversations where CEOs accept that risk and don't report it because they don't want the bad press. Now, that's a recipe for disaster, and that's a recipe for a major fine, from the SEC, and maybe even a C&D regarding some specific activities they might be involved with. It's transparency is the name of the game, right? If we look at this industry, I'll go back to the word fiduciary, right? You are our fiduciary to report and respond and transparently let people know what is going on within your company and to hide that. You don't want to be the Uber CIO who was trying to pay money under the table and to hush money to not let anybody know anything happened. That's not the way to go about life or go about your business. And that destroys trust. Trust is so important in our business. Even if you have bad news, you got to share that news, and you have to make sure you let the clients know something happened, and these are what we're doing to prevent it from happening again. Now, you run reputational risk, you run risk that you might have some clients leave, as a matter of fact, but if you don't do it, imagine how much worse it could be.
Yeah, what's the implications if you don't? It reminds me of, just for our listeners to remember, when you have cyber insurance, breach mitigation is part of that. Now, we always want our clients to have a good managed service provider like Visory first, really. And then when we also have that cyber, part of that breach mitigation is actually checking all of the different municipalities or organizations. What's that regulatory structure? So when we're reporting it, are we reporting it in the right mechanisms and stuff like that? We have the insurance carriers going to help with that process. So it's a teamwork situation when you're in the middle of the claim, from what I'm seeing out there when we get claims. And each situation is so unique.
Yeah, and we also, our clients fill out insurance applications to say, these are all the things we're doing, because a lot of times clients don't know what they don't know. They can't fill out can you help me fill out the insurance application? Absolutely, because we're the ones doing all the background. Rob, go ahead. I know you had a thought you were going off on.
No, speaking of claims, I think it's really important, as anybody who's watching or listening right now, Steve, what I'd love to hear, and I think it's important for everybody else to hear, is, can you give us some examples of situations or give us some scenarios that you have encountered over the years, which was a really bad situation? It turned into maybe a claim, or maybe tell some war stories. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. So oftentimes, most of the times is people clicking on things that they shouldn't be clicking on. That's been the majority of the incidents. We've some things that just make you say, wow. We've had situations where clients had a security incident and we recommend some changes in procedures, and clients say, no, it's too inconvenient, right? Security is not convenient, right? It is not convenient. And in reality, as I always tell RIAs, I'm in the same line of work as you are. You're managing risk for clients. I'm managing risk risk for clients. We have a certain level of security protocols everybody gets, period, or you're not doing business advisory. Everybody gets those protocols. Then there's the next level of protocol, which is now let's talk about the deeper dive and the inconveniences and how inconvenient do you want things to be. And those are the situations where it's critical to review all those risks. So we've seen wire transfers go out through a business email compromise where it went where it shouldn't have gone. We've seen people not having multi-factor authentication enforced early on. It's not so much anymore. Pretty much that's got it. I think people have really finally seen the light on the multi-factor authentication being done. You're seeing certainly adversary in the middle attacks where people are compromising cell phones and Microsoft Authenticator and cutting out the middleman and still being able to get into people's emails. I think social engineering, artificial intelligence by looking online and learning more quickly and trying to learn patterns and mannerisms of people and trying to employees to wire transfer money where it's not really technically a business email compromise. They change a character on their domain name and try to insert themselves into the conversation and get money to be transferred out to other places in situations like that.
Yeah. So you mentioned AI. So I'm going to bring it up specifically as AI because sometimes it washes over us pretty quick. What I heard you say, if you could go into it a little bit deeper, is that you guys out there using AI to research clients or potentially research clients to do these social engineering situations. So it's not just, I guess this loops back again to it's really the softest, easiest point is us as individuals, because we're easier to trick maybe than a really good system that you've employed.
It is. And I'll tell you probably the worst thing happened years ago. And this is where it comes down to really employees really taking ownership and understanding the responsibility that they have as an employee. And this is a former client, happened, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. An employee was on Facebook, downloaded some malware on the network and some ransom and ended up encrypting gigs and gigs of data. I can't remember how much, but enough data that it took about 10 hours to recover the data. Just to share, not a risk as far we were able to cover data, stop the ransomware, and get them up back and running. It did take 10 hours just because it took time to restore, right? Just took time. So I recommended to the client, because employees really didn't need Facebook. This was a type of business. It wasn't enough, but it was another business. They really didn't need access to Facebook. And I said, you should really probably want to block that. And the employee who did the damage was upset and said this, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because it's been a while, essentially said, yeah, but I was on my lunch hour when I did that. So I wasn't on company time. And I'm like, you're kidding me, right? You took the company down for 10 hours. Could have been worse. Thankfully, we were there and we reacted quick enough and got them up and back and running within the 10 hours. As quickly as we could, again, because of the amount of data we're talking about that we have to recover. And that was the mentality. Now, if that person worked for me, I would have walked him out the door. This is an effort of protecting our company and protecting our clients. And this was a pretty sizable company.
Protecting our clients, but not only that, protecting future revenue, which is protecting your future job.
And I wish I was making this story up, but that was just an apathetic response. You're kidding me. I didn't do it on my business time. Do you know what you did? Yeah. Do you know what you did? But back to the conversation, having a culture of people understanding the risk and liability of anything they can do can affect the company, can affect their clients, their employees, their livelihood. You saw, it was a company that just filed bankruptcy, the alcohol company, a gin company in Russia that did file bankruptcy. Stoli just filed bankruptcy because of a ransomware event. Now, they said it was state-sponsored, and I'm sure they upset the Russian government or whatever, but the moral still stands true. They got a ransomware event. They couldn't recover from it. It destroyed their company.
Yep.
Hey,
this can go.
Yeah.
Just have one more thing to add or ask, and then we can land the plane. So Steve, it's interesting because every time back in the day when I sold, I was a high performing machine, sales producer machine. And whenever I'd have that question, a client would question me by saying, why do I need a standalone monoline cyber liability policy? I already have coverage. It's on my GL. My agent told me I have coverage. And I'd always chuckle and I'd often say, you need a monoline policy. You have employees. employees. And what they don't understand sometimes, I don't think business owners truly understand that the number one risk that they face, and I have to educate them on this, is your employees. If your employees aren't really trained, they're not properly educated. And by the way, if you talk about culture, if they are not fully transparent with you in what they're doing and they try to hide things, I didn't really click on that thing, or you need to have a culture where people are going to be transparent when bad things do happen, that they report it, and that they're well trained. So what's your position on that? What is the number one thing, as we're finishing, what's the number one thing that RIAs can do to be proactive about managing their cybersecurity internally, in-house with their teams, making sure that they're adequately prepared, have adequate training, and that they're being proactive every single day about managing these risks?
It's got to be a conversation, Rob. It's got to be a conversation. It's got to be on the table. It cannot be an afterthought. It's got to be proactive, part of their business culture, and it's got to be part of their hygiene. It's got to be part of their daily hygiene, and they have to be prepared to make sure that they're going to address it. Their employees feel safe to be able to say something if they did something, because it could save the business. It could literally save the business if they click on something and they say something immediately rather than delay. If they delay, time is money. Every click off that clock is a risk of the company going out of business. So culture, security awareness training, the obvious phishing emails, training videos, all those things that all security providers should be doing. Critical part of it, certainly something we do, that has got to be first and foremost to make sure that people are doing those things.
Great. Steve, I think we could, because this is never ending.
We could probably go another hour.
But hey, I really appreciate you coming in. And the question that we love to wrap up with, because it really tells us a lot about you. I know you're a great guy from the time we've spent together. But
I'm going to send this to my wife.
Okay. All right. Hey, third party. If you can tell, if they can tell you, it's good. So no,
my wife's really great, by the way. I just kid, but she's
I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway,
actually, I don't know if I've met her at a conference. I know you guys
probably not. She doesn't like to come to too many of them.
She probably like my wife. She might be there, but she's going to have more fun than sitting on the conference floor.
Something else, or we might extend the weekend somewhere, and she'll be at the front end or the back end of it. But anyway, sorry.
Absolutely. When you're sitting on the porch and you've had a life that's well lived, you've worked with a lot of clients, done a lot of interesting things. What do you want to be known for?
Ooh, boy, Chad, that's a great question. That's a thoughtful question. For me, it's about, I want to be known as like a servant leader, selfless, fiduciary, as we spoke. I've done a lot of things over my career. I think the most things I've been most proud of is things I've done for other people. I've been in a Rotary Club for many years. I've gone to El Salvador 13 times. I've built houses. I've helped with computer setups in schools. I've been to Ecuador 5 times doing the same thing. Actually, Ecuador was all computer stuff. El Salvador was mainly building houses. And I just signed up for, I haven't done anything with it yet, but an organization called, I mentioned to you the other day, we were chatting, Team Rubicon. I know you'll get into it a little bit, but I can see volunteering for some disaster type situations. So I don't know, when somebody looks down at me when I'm 6 feet underground, I'm just hoping somebody says, he was a good guy. He was a good guy. That's where I think I'd like to fit in someday.
I'll tell you this. I think you're a great guy and you're very helpful. I've been impressed when we've done the presentations together, how truly it's not just that you're up there saying, hey, these are some helpful things to know. You mean it. It's genuine. It's there. Quick question, and we may cut this out or may not, but do you think in the show notes, you have maybe a link that we could put in there for one of your presentations? Because if it's possible.
I don't know. I got to do some digging. I don't know if there are any online, honestly.
Okay.
I've got to do some digging if I have one.
If we have one, that would be cool, because every presentation I've seen you do, there's multiple nuggets in there.
Yeah,
this has been fun and good, but we also, let's see where we can be helpful to. That's why the Advisor's Edge is here, is also to be helpful. So we are honored and thrilled, and it's fun to see you.
You guys are the best. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, listen, before we end, Steve, how can people get in touch with you if they were interested in learning more about Visory and maybe connecting with you on LinkedIn and maybe starting that conversation? What's the best way for people to reach you?
Yeah, so my email is sryder, SRYDER at visory.net, not com, but net. And our website is visory.net as well. Just look me up there if there's anything I can do. And again, back to what I said earlier, I'm here to assist people. So even if I can't assist you by becoming a client of Visory, if I can give folks some advice or help them on the right path, I've done that many times for firms that are smaller and there's nothing we can do to help them or bring them on as a client, or I don't think it'd be a good fit. But I've given advice to sole proprietors and always want want to help people in the industry to be successful. So happy to help anybody.
Awesome.
That's why we do this show. But we love bringing on guys like you, Steve, and we just absolutely we feel blessed and honored that you agree to come on and share your wisdom and share your knowledge and share your expertise with our community and the audience that we're trying to build as well. So guys, listen, that's a wrap. So much, Steve. I can hear the alarm going off.
I hear the alarm go off. I'm going to make my 4 o'clock.
That's right.
That's right. We can just.
You guys are awesome. Thank you. Can't thank you enough for having me. I appreciate it. I really.
It's awesome.